Imagine standing in the middle of a room filled with people celebrating a major life milestone. Friends are laughing, loved ones are exchanging hugs, and music fills the air. Or picture yourself sitting at a quiet memorial service for someone you deeply cared about, surrounded by weeping relatives. In both moments, you look inward, searching for the natural emotional response that should define the experience. You expect to feel a surge of joy, a swell of gratitude, or a heavy wave of grief. But instead, you are met with a cold, hollow silence. No tears form. No real smile reaches your eyes. Your pulse remains static, and your heart feels entirely unchanged. It is as though your inner emotional landscape has been replaced by a flat, gray void. You are physically present, yet entirely detached from the reality around you. You are living behind an invisible, soundproof wall of glass. This perplexing and deeply unsettling phenomenon is known in behavioral science and psychiatry as emotional blunting. It is fundamentally different from occasional sadness, bad moods, or typical physical fatigue. Emotional blunting is characterized by a global compression of your entire emotional range. It is not just that you cannot feel sad, you also cannot feel happy, inspired, romantic, or amused. The emotional volume slider of your life has been turned down to zero. For those who experience it, emotional blunting is often far more distressing than intense emotional pain. Pain, as difficult as it is, serves as proof that your internal machinery is still functioning. Emotional blunting, by contrast, feels like a silent anesthesia that strips away the texture of existence, leaving you to navigate life as a spectator in your own mind. As emotional blunting persists, daily existence devolves into a constant, exhausting performance. You quickly realize that society expects emotional reciprocity. When a partner shares good news, you know you ought to look excited, so you smile and raise your voice pitch to mimic enthusiasm. When a colleague describes a hardship, you tilt your head and offer comforting words, acting out empathy. But beneath the surface, you feel like an actor reciting lines from a pre-written script. Every smile is calculated, every expression manufactured. This persistent social masking leads to a profound sense of self-alienation and cognitive dissonance. You begin to ask terrifying questions about yourself. Have I become a sociopath? Am I fundamentally broken? Why can I no longer care about the people I love? This hidden shame only adds to the immense psychological pressure you are already carrying. The fallout of emotional blunting extends into every single corner of human functioning. Relationships suffer immensely because genuine intimacy relies on dynamic emotional resonance. When your partner looks into your eyes and senses no reflection of their feeling, an invisible barrier forms between you, turning connection into a heavy, obligation-filled chore. At work, your drive and ambition evaporate. Human motivation is structurally fueled by emotional anticipation, the forward-looking expectation of pride, satisfaction, financial security, or relief. Without the capacity to feel prospective reward, goal-directed behavior collapses, leaving you struggling to complete even basic administrative tasks. Even daily choices become agonizingly difficult. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio demonstrated through his somatic marker hypothesis that human decision-making is not purely rational. It relies on subtle body-based emotional signals that tell us what we prefer. Without these somatic markers, choosing what to eat, what to wear, or how to answer an email turns into an exhausting, endless logical debate. To truly understand emotional blunting, we must look beyond personal failure and examine the intricate survival machinery of the human nervous system. Your brain evolved over millions of years with a single primary directive: keep you alive. When confronted with acute danger, such as a physical predator, the amygdala activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, releasing a powerful surge of cortisol and adrenaline. This fight-or-flight response mobilizes energy reserves, sharpens focus, and heightens emotional reactivity to help you survive the immediate threat. Once the crisis passes, the parasympathetic nervous system engages, bringing your physiology back into equilibrium. However, the human nervous system was never designed to endure unending, high-intensity stress. Modern life exposes us to chronic, low-grade, inescapable threats: persistent financial pressures, toxic work environments, unaddressed emotional trauma, dysfunctional relationships, and non-stop digital stimulation. When stress hormones remain elevated for weeks, months, or years, the constant hyperarousal threatens catastrophic neurochemical and physiological damage. Sustained high cortisol levels damage hippocampal neurons, disrupt neurotransmitter synthesis, impair prefrontal cortex function, and place excessive strain on the cardiovascular system. Faced with the imminent threat of neurobiological burnout, your brain executes a dramatic survival intervention. It engages top-down inhibitory control from the prefrontal cortex over the limbic system, deliberately suppressing emotional processing. In essence, your brain flips a high-voltage biological circuit breaker. Emotional blunting is not a defect or a sign of weakness. It is a highly sophisticated protective emergency protocol. Your nervous system recognizes that it cannot afford the massive metabolic cost of continuously processing intense emotional information. It dials down your sensitivity to protect your core neural architecture from burning out entirely. Your brain is essentially saying, we must sacrifice feelings so we can survive. The fundamental flaw in this evolutionary survival mechanism is its inability to discriminate between positive and negative emotional signals. Neural pathways responsible for processing emotional pain are intricately intertwined with those that process emotional pleasure. The limbic system, the dopaminergic reward pathways, and the endogenous opioid systems form a shared network for all affective experiences. When your prefrontal cortex dampens limbic sensitivity to protect you from overwhelming grief, panic, or anger, it simultaneously shuts down your ability to experience joy, awe, love, and amusement. You cannot install a floodgate that blocks only bitter water while letting sweet water flow through freely. When the gate drops, all emotional movement stops. When people discover they are stuck in emotional numbness, their initial psychological reaction is often panic. Terrified by the lack of feeling, they attempt to force their nervous system back to life through intense behavioral stimulation. This manifests as sensation-seeking behaviors: compulsive doom scrolling through alarming news, consuming extreme media, engaging in reckless financial or physical choices, overeating, or abusing substances. The underlying motive is rarely pleasure. It is a desperate attempt to shock the brain into registering any signal at all, even if that signal is shock, disgust, or fear. Regrettably, forcing an emotionally blunted system through high-intensity stimulation produces the exact opposite of the desired result. Flooding a desensitized nervous system with excessive dopamine and adrenaline further depletes already exhausted neurotransmitter receptors. It reinforces the brain's baseline perception that the environment is chaotic, dangerous, and overwhelming. Attempting to cure emotional blunting with extreme stimulation is like slamming your foot on the accelerator of a car whose engine is severely overheated. It does not fix the underlying mechanical crisis. It simply accelerates neurochemical exhaustion, causing the brain to lock the circuit breaker down even tighter. A second common trap is hyperfixating on the numbness itself. Individuals spend vast amounts of mental energy monitoring their emotional responses, constantly asking themselves, am I feeling anything now? Why didn't I cry at that video? Why don't I feel happy right now? This continuous internal monitoring creates a secondary layer of chronic meta-anxiety, worrying about the inability to feel. The brain interprets this relentless internal scrutiny and anxiety as ongoing threat, signaling to the autonomic nervous system that conditions remain unsafe, thereby perpetuating the freeze state indefinitely. To construct an effective recovery framework, we turn to polyvagal theory, pioneered by Dr. Stephen Porges. Polyvagal theory illuminates how our autonomic nervous system continually monitors internal and external cues, a process called neuroception, to determine our state of safety or threat. When we feel safe, the ventral vagal pathway dominates, enabling calm connection, emotional flexibility, and social engagement. When threat appears, the sympathetic nervous system mobilizes us into fight or flight. However, when threat is chronic, inescapable, or completely overwhelming and mobilizing fails, the nervous system drops into its oldest evolutionary safeguard, the dorsal vagal response. Emotional blunting is the direct psychological manifestation of this dorsal vagal immobilization response, often called the freeze state or conservation withdrawal. In this state, metabolic activity slows down, heart rate variability alters, and emotional sensitivity is flattened to conserve energy. Recognizing emotional blunting as a dorsal vagal freeze state completely transforms how we approach recovery. You cannot command a frozen nervous system to thaw through intellectual force, self-criticism, or intense effort. A freeze response can only be resolved by systematically introducing undeniable cues of physiological safety. The journey back to emotional vitality requires a 4-part scientific protocol. Step 1 is radical acceptance and biological gratitude. You must fundamentally change your cognitive attitude toward your numbness. Stop viewing your emotional blunting as a personal failure or an enemy to overcome. Recognize it for what it truly is, an incredible protective shield deployed by your brain to keep you safe when stress exceeded your coping capacity. When you replace frustrated judgment with genuine biological gratitude, acknowledging that your brain did this to protect you, you immediately disarm the secondary meta-anxiety that keeps your threat response active. Step 2 is microsomatic interoception. Interoception is your internal sensory capacity to feel the internal state of your physical body. Because complex emotional processing is suppressed, you must rebuild your neural pathways starting with simple, neutral, non-threatening physical sensations. Do not try to force complex feelings like love, joy, or grief. Instead, practice directing your attention to basic physical inputs for 2 to 3 minutes a day. Feel the warmth of hot water washing over your hands. Focus on the physical texture of a stone held in your palm. Pay attention to the subtle weight of your feet resting on the floor, or the cool air entering your nostrils as you breathe. These microsomatic exercises stimulate the insular cortex, the brain region responsible for processing bodily felt sense, without alarming the threat detection centers of the limbic system. Step 3 is systematic baseline load reduction. Your brain will not reset its emotional circuit breaker as long as it senses that the daily load remains dangerously high. You must aggressively audit your lifestyle and eliminate non-essential stressors. Set strict boundaries around your work hours. Reduce time spent consuming news and social media. Step back from taxing social dynamics, and ruthlessly prioritize sleep hygiene. Sleep is the non-negotiable foundation of neurological repair. During deep sleep phases, the brain's glymphatic system clears out cellular metabolic waste and recalibrates neuroreceptor sensitivity. By lowering your daily background stress, you create the energetic surplus required for your nervous system to consider coming out of freeze. Step 4 is titrated emotional permission and co-regulation. As your baseline load decreases, tiny ripples of emotion will naturally begin to break through the gray surface. A momentary surge of irritation, a fleeting spark of curiosity, or a faint touch of sadness when listening to a piece of music. When these moments occur, do not try to suppress them, and do not desperately try to amplify them. Practice emotional titration. Allow yourself to experience these tiny droplets of feeling for just a few seconds without judgment. Show your prefrontal cortex that feeling small emotions no longer leads to systemic collapse. Pair this practice with co-regulation, spending calm, unhurried time in the presence of safe, supportive people, gentle pets, or tranquil natural environments. The human autonomic nervous system naturally mirrors the regulated states of surrounding safety, speeding up your transition out of dorsal vagal shutdown. It is vital to prepare yourself for the realistic dynamics of emotional thawing. Unfreezing a suppressed emotional system is rarely an immediate surge of happiness. More often, as the protective anesthesia wears off, the first emotions to resurface are the uncomfortable ones that led to the shutdown in the first place. Residual grief, stored frustration, deep fatigue, or latent anxiety. Many people mistake this phase as a regression, panicking that their mental health is worsening. In reality, feeling uncomfortable emotions after months of total emptiness is a profound sign of neural recovery. It means your nervous system now feels secure enough to process the backlog of suppressed emotional material. As you navigate this delicate thawing process, remind yourself that healing is nonlinear. There will be days when color returns to the world, verifying that the environment remains safe. Honor the gray days without despair, knowing that your neural architecture is continuously adapting and recalibrating in the background. If you are currently living in the silent gray world of emotional blunting, hold tightly to this physiological reality. Your capacity for deep love, vibrant joy, creative passion, and authentic connection is not dead. It has not been permanently erased. It is merely resting inside a secure biological vault, carefully guarded by a nervous system that fought valiantly to protect you from a storm you were never meant to carry alone. You do not need to fix yourself today, nor do you need to force a single feeling. Simply reduce the heavy burdens you carry, offer your body true physiological rest, and give your brain the quiet space it needs to realize that the war is over. Slowly, step by step, signal by signal, the circuit breaker will reset, the fog will clear, and you will step back into the full, magnificent spectrum of your human life.